I'm now joined by Mike Tapp, Labour MP for Dover and Deal. So you've been in the US for the last week or so, I think, speaking to Kamala Harris's team. What have you been doing there? Can you tell us a bit about your trip?
It was a really interesting trip. Essentially what we're doing, we went over in January, a group of candidates at the time, to learn from the Americans and the Democrats and looking at their campaign methods, etc. We went back out, obviously, after our landslide victory to impart some of our knowledge as to what we learned on the campaign trail and look at what they're doing with their campaign. It's really interesting, actually. And look, one of the big messages that I was taking over there was to ensure that with their campaign, they do what we did, and that is listen to what working class, hard-working people want. Don't ignore them. And for me in Dover and Deal, a perfect example of that is worries and concerns around immigration. You know, these people have valid concerns. They're not racist. We must drop that sort of rhetoric and deal with these issues, just like Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper are doing. And it does look like Kamala and her team are going down that route as well, which is great. I mean,
yes, you did a great job of winning Dover and Deal. I'm not taking that away from you at all. But your majority now is you only got it because the Conservative vote was split with the Reform vote. Is that something that you're at all worried about? You talk about being very serious about immigration, Reform's being serious about immigration, and people are taking them seriously. Do you think you need to take some lessons from Nigel Farage?
I mean, you could also argue, you know, in Dover, for example, that the Green and the Lib Dem vote combined would give, you know, over 50%. So it works both ways. But those voters who are concerned about immigration haven't been ignored by me or by the party. And you can see that already with our immigration policy. Remember, it's only 50 days and, you know, there is a common sense approach to this that it doesn't happen overnight. We started recruiting for the new Border Security Commander. We've already recruited over 100 new intelligence officers who are working across Europe. We've conducted 9 deportation flights. We're looking at 1,000 officers being brought into a specific deportation unit. So there's a hell of a lot of work going on behind the scenes, but these things do take time to have a real impact.
But I mean, the immigration statistics out this week, very, very complicated, mixed bag. It did show that the small boat arrivals were beginning to go down under Rishi Sunak. And part of that may have been because, although the Rwanda plan wasn't yet up and running, it was beginning to deter people. Your government doesn't really seem to have a proper disincentive to stop people wanting to come over here. Isn't that going to be a bit of an issue?
Well, I think, firstly, Rwanda was a gimmick that costs a hell of a lot of money that was wasted, and it would have taken up to 100 years to deport those that have crossed in that way. It simply wasn't a deterrent. Look, you know, you could argue that we're 25% lower because of the first 50 days in government, but that's not the case, right? Let's be realistic here. We've got a lot of work to do, and the deterrent that we bring in is twofold. Firstly, we're going to smash the gangs. We're bringing in the likes of MI5 with those extra powers and tools to take them on.
Smashing the gangs, though, I mean, it's easier said than done. The Conservative government obviously wanted to smash the gangs. These gangs are very nimble, they move all over the place. There isn't some sort of big boss crime man who can just be got out of the way.
Absolutely.
How are you going to do a better job?
I've worked against serious and organised criminals with the National Crime Agency, but also in a counter-terror role. So I've seen the difference that those extra powers and tools make. So bringing in MI5 to this fight will have a big impact. Of course, it's not the full answer, but we will be their worst nightmare. Of course, it takes time to pursue and bring these evil criminals to justice. And a part of that also is disruption. It's not all about sticking them in prison, as much as we'd love to do that. Meeting that evidential threshold is often very difficult, but there are methods to disrupt these operations too. And if we're deporting more that shouldn't be here, which we already are, that acts as a deterrent in itself.
I mean, all of this sounds great. It also sounds quite expensive. You don't really have very much money. So Keir Starmer said over and over again during the election campaign that he wouldn't be raising taxes on working people. You can tell from the trail of the speech that he's going to give on Tuesday that he feels that the country's coffers are basically empty. And yet you are giving these inflation-busting pay rises across the public sector. There are estimates that it could be worth about sort of £13 billion. Couldn't that money be better spent on, for example, winter fuel payments for pensioners or some of these fantastic measures to stop the gangs that you're talking about here?
Yeah, so we have inherited a mess, the highest tax burden since the Second World War, and borrowing is at its highest since the 60s, plus this black hole that we've inherited as a surprise.
You talk about the black hole. This is all quite easy to say. What about those public sector pay rises?
The money that we're investing in the Border Security Command is all fully funded by scrapping this gimmick Rwanda scheme. And when it comes to things like winter fuel payments, I have a lot of sympathy with that. But they are targeted and means tested. So those that do need it will receive it. We're also looking at, around 900,000 people. You say that those who will need it will receive it.
We know that there are lots and lots of people who might be eligible for pension credits but don't know they're eligible for pension credits.
900,000. And what I've said to my constituents, and I say this to viewers, if you think you might be eligible, please get in touch with your MP or, use the internet to check that out, because there are around 900,000 people who are eligible. So there is that extra help. But there's also, I must talk about the long-term plan here. So there is short-term support for people. But the reason this is happening is because we've inherited an energy system that essentially means when there are, the likes of Putin who are causing the disruption that they do, the energy prices go up. If we can go fully renewable by 2030, which is our ambition, it does give us more control over those prices. So we do have long-term plans here as well. And this is why Keir Starmer's going to be really clear, and he has been, that we are inheriting a mess, and it's not easy.
Well, inheriting a mess, but we've seen Ed Miliband sort of running full steam ahead for net zero by 2030. Laudable aim. But the truth is that this country is still very, very reliant on gas. It's still very reliant on fossil fuels. And it sometimes feels as though your government is sort of acting for the world that we want to be in rather than the world that we're actually being. And for the time being, there are times when wind energy only provides 1% of the energy that we need. In those times, we need our gas, we need our oil, and those prices are going up. Your government said that it was going to do something about that. It said that it was somehow going to stop the energy providers charging so much. Do you still believe that now you're in office?
Look, absolutely. So this takes time, and wind is a part of the solution. There's also obviously nuclear. And look, what we're looking at doing is creating essentially a self-sustained energy system, so the likes of Putin can't have control over our energy prices, and that's really important. But in the short term, there are pension credits and winter fuel help for those that need the help desperately. What we can't do is continue down the road that the Conservatives have set us on, which is, reliance on the likes of Putin to provide us with our energy supplies. So this is a really positive way forward that will not only bring down costs, but also create thousands of jobs and growth. And we haven't had growth for a long time, over a decade.
Well,
minimal growth in the last 2 years.
Lots of people, particularly people in Port Talbot, will be thinking, I'll believe that when we see it. But yeah, you've got your time, and now's your chance to shine. Another issue, you talk about over-reliance on Putin, which is, of course, deeply, deeply worrying. We are in a globally very, very unstable world. We need a proper army for that sort of world. We need a proper navy. Rishi Sunak promised over the election campaign that he would raise spending to 2.5% of GDP. Pretty much every senior army and navy official who I've spoken to thinks it should be even higher than that. Keir Starmer won't commit to 2.5%. Why is that? And do you think he's right?
Well, firstly, I come from a military background before going into serious organised crime and counter-terror work, and we do need to raise that funding for the military. And Keir Starmer has actually been really clear that the ambition is to get to 2.5%.
Been really clear that the ambition is to get to 2.5%. He hasn't put a time on that.
Look, the Conservatives didn't get to 2.5% even. They had 14 years. So, we're not going to sit here and make promises that we can't deliver, because the public are fed up of that. So what we're saying is when we fiscally can, we will raise that threshold to 2.5%, and that's really important that we're realistic with that. I
suppose the danger is that, when we fiscally can, Putin isn't going to be waiting around until when we fiscally can raise that defence budget. Do you think that the Labour government should raise the defence budget to 2.5% of GDP by the end of that 5-year term, yes or no?
Look, the answer is when it's fiscally, when we are fiscally in a position to do so. It's as simple as that. I'd love to be able to say yes, but we've got to be responsible with the nation's purse strings. Simple as that.
Thank you very much, Mike Tapp. Really good to speak to you.
No problem. Thank you.